blood, betrayal, and a multi-million-dollar empire hanging by a thread. When a silent, unnoticed nighttime cleaner overhears a deadly translation during a high-stakes syndicate meeting, she must make a choice: walk away in the shadows, or step into the crosshairs to tell a ruthless mafia boss that his own wife is setting him up to die. Naomi Washington was a ghost in a city that only worshipped the visible. To the men in the bespoke Italian suits and the women draped in unethically sourced diamonds, she was nothing more than the navy blue uniform she wore. She was the mop, the microfiber cloth, the silent shadow that erased the scuff marks of the elite from the marble floors of the Sterling Tower. In the penthouse boardroom of the Chicago skyline, however, erasing scuff marks often meant sweeping away the ashes of burned evidence, wiping down tables where millions of dollars of illicit money changed hands, and pretending not to see the occasional splatter of dark crimson on the Persian rugs. Naomi worked for a shell cleaning company, a discreet outfit employed exclusively by Noah, the head of the city's most formidable Korean syndicate. Despite the westernized name he adopted for the corporate world, Noah's roots, ruthlessness, and old-school code of honor were legendary in the underground. He was a man of terrifying stillness. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. A single sharp look from his dark, calculating eyes was enough to shatter the bravado of the hardest street bosses. Naomi knew the rules of survival in Noah's world. Keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your eyes on the floor. For 2 years, she had done exactly that. She was a 32-year-old black woman who had once studied international linguistics at Georgetown, dreaming of a career in diplomacy. But life had a funny way of derailing dreams. A family medical crisis, a mountain of crushing debt, and a desperate need for fast, untraceable cash had driven her into the night shift of the underworld. Her brilliant mind, once praised by professors for its sponge-like ability to absorb dialects, was now used to calculate the exact ratio of bleach needed to lift blood from silk. But Naomi retained her gift. She spoke flawless Russian, fluent Spanish, and had even spent 2 years teaching English in Seoul, picking up a near-native grasp of conversational and formal Korean. It was a secret arsenal locked behind her quiet demeanor. It was a Tuesday night. The air outside, freezing and heavy with impending snow, when the atmosphere inside the Sterling penthouse shifted from its usual cold corporate sterility to something distinctly electric. Naomi was buffing the brass fixtures in the adjoining private bar when the heavy oak doors to the main boardroom swung open. Noah strode in, flanked by his 2 top lieutenants, Gabriel and Simon. Noah looked like a predator poured into a charcoal gray suit. His jaw was tight, the muscles ticking subtly beneath his skin. Tonight was the night of the massive waterfront merger. Trailing behind Noah, walking with the practiced grace of a runway model, was his wife, Beatrice. Beatrice was stunning, with sharp, aristocratic features, piercing blue eyes, and ash blonde hair pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She was the daughter of a prominent corrupt state senator, a marriage forged in the fires of strategic alliance. Beatrice was cold, impossibly poised, and entirely untouchable. To the syndicate, she was the perfect mob wife, loyal, decorative, and most importantly, useful. She was a polyglot who often handled Noah's international communications, shielding his business from the ears of outside interpreters. "Make sure the perimeter is entirely locked down," Noah ordered Gabriel, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded absolute obedience. "Dylan is not a man who forgives a lack of security." "Yes, boss. The elevators are cut off." "The stairwells are manned," Gabriel replied, bowing his head slightly before stepping out to the corridor. Naomi kept her back turned to the room, diligently polishing a crystal whiskey decanter. She was virtually invisible to them. The door separating the bar from the boardroom remained open a crack, allowing the waiters who had long since been dismissed for the night to hear when they were summoned. Naomi was the only staff member left on the floor. "Are you ready for this, Beatrice?" Noah asked, turning to his wife. His tone softened slightly, a rare crack in his armor. It was the only time Naomi ever saw Noah look remotely human when he looked at Beatrice. "Of course, Noah," Beatrice murmured, adjusting the lapels of his suit. "Dylan is a brute, but he respects money, and he respects power. You have both. I will make sure he understands exactly what you are offering." Dylan was the head of a brutal, hyper-violent Eastern European faction that controlled the docks. They were moving a massive shipment of heavy artillery through the city, and Noah was buying the entire lot to solidify his absolute dominance over the Midwest. Dylan, however, was notoriously paranoid and refused to speak English during negotiations, believing it to be the language of wiretaps and federal agents. He communicated solely in his native Russian. Naomi, running a damp cloth over the mahogany bar top, felt a strange prickle on the back of her neck. She had seen Beatrice looking at her phone earlier in the evening, a burner phone, not her usual diamond encrusted device. Beatrice had typed furiously, her expression pulled into a tight, anxious sneer, before snapping it shut and dropping it into her designer clutch. The moment Noah entered the room, there was a heavy, suffocating tension in the penthouse. Naomi instinctively knew that something was deeply wrong. The air tasted like copper and ozone. The private elevator dinged. Dylan had arrived. Dylan walked into the boardroom like a bear entering a china shop. He was a massive man, scarred and weathered, wrapped in a heavy overcoat that smelled of cheap tobacco and salt water. 4 heavily armed men flanked him, their eyes darting around the room, hands resting dangerously close to their waistbands. Noah remained seated at the head of the long glass table, projecting relaxed authority. He gestured to the empty chairs opposite him. "Welcome, Dylan," Noah said, offering a curt nod. Beatrice sat at Noah's right side, a sleek leather notepad in front of her. Dylan grunted, dropping into a chair. He leaned forward, resting his massive forearms on the table, and began to speak in rapid, guttural Russian. Naomi, standing in the shadows of the bar, paused her wiping. Her ears locked onto the cadences. "I don't like this building. Too many windows. Let's get this over with. The shipment arrives tonight at Pier 40, exactly at midnight," Dylan growled in Russian. "But listen to me carefully, Noah. My men are on edge. The feds have been circling. If your men show up to the docks carrying heavy weapons, my snipers will consider it an ambush. We will open fire immediately. Come clean, come light, and the exchange happens peacefully." It was a standard paranoid demand from a weapons dealer. Come unarmed to prove trust. Noah looked at Beatrice, waiting for the translation. Beatrice cleared her throat, her face a mask of absolute calm. She turned to her husband and spoke in clear, measured English. He says, "The shipment arrives at midnight at Pier 40. However, the feds have been circling the area. He insists that your men come heavily armed and in full force to secure the perimeter alongside his men, just in case there is a raid." Naomi's breath hitched in her throat. The microfiber cloth slipped from her hand, landing silently on the carpeted floor. "What?" She stared through the crack in the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. That wasn't a minor mistranslation. That was a direct, calculated inversion of Dylan's terms. If Noah sent his men to Pier 40 heavily armed, Dylan's snipers would instantly open fire. It would be a slaughter, a complete massacre of Noah's top crew. Dylan continued, oblivious to the English translation. "The ledger containing the serial numbers and the offshore routing codes will be held by my lieutenant, Yuri, who will wait by the south crane. Noah, you must stay by your car. Do not approach Yuri. Let your second in command handle the ledger. If you, the boss, approach my lieutenant, my men will think you are trying to take him hostage. Stay back." Beatrice turned to Noah, her blue eyes wide and earnest. He adds that you must personally take the ledger from his lieutenant, Yuri, by the south crane. Dylan says it is a matter of respect. If you send Gabriel or anyone else to take it, he will consider it an insult and cancel the deal. Naomi felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead. She's trying to get him killed. Beatrice wasn't just setting up Noah's men. She was ensuring that Noah himself walked directly into the kill zone. If Noah approached the lieutenant, Dylan's men would gun him down without hesitation. It was a flawless assassination plot. Dylan would think Noah was breaking the rules and attacking. Noah would think he was following Dylan's requested protocol. They would destroy each other, and Beatrice would be perfectly positioned to inherit the empire as the grieving, innocent widow. Noah narrowed his eyes, studying Dylan. Dylan simply glared back, waiting for Noah's agreement. "Tell him," Noah said slowly to Beatrice, "that I accept his terms. We will be heavily armed to protect his flank, and I will personally greet his lieutenant to receive the ledger, a sign of mutual respect." Beatrice nodded, turning back to Dylan. She spoke in perfect Russian. "My husband accepts your terms. We will come unarmed, and he will stay by his car while his lieutenant retrieves the ledger. Dylan smiled, a grim, terrifying showing of teeth. Good. We have a deal. The men stood. Hands were shaken. The trap was locked and loaded. As Dylan and his men filed out of the room to return to the docks, Noah stood up, adjusting his cuffs. Gabriel, he called out to his lieutenant, gather the men. Every assault rifle, every piece of body armor we have. We're locking down Pier 40 tonight. And I want my personal security detail tight on me when I go to the South Crane. Naomi backed away from the door, her mind spinning into a panicked overdrive. She was a cleaner, a nobody. If she walked into that boardroom and accused the boss's beautiful, high society wife of treason, Gabriel would put a bullet in her head before she could finish her sentence. Who would Noah believe? His polished, devoted wife, or the nameless night shift cleaner with a spray bottle of Windex? But if she did nothing, dozens of men were going to die tonight. Noah would be shredded by sniper fire, and Beatrice, the serpent in designer heels, would win. Think, Naomi. Think. She watched through the gap as Beatrice excused herself, kissing Noah softly on the cheek. I'm going to head back to the estate, darling. Please be careful tonight. I always am, Noah replied softly. Beatrice left the boardroom, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble until they faded toward the private elevator. Noah remained behind, turning his back to pour himself a glass of whiskey before the impending war. Naomi had less than 5 minutes before Noah left for the docks. She needed to warn him, but it had to be undeniable. It had to cut through his trust in Beatrice and strike directly at his paranoia. She quickly slipped into the executive kitchen just down the hall. She grabbed a thick, cream-colored napkin and a black Sharpie from the inventory drawer. Her hands were shaking violently as she uncapped the pen. She had to write it in a way that proved she understood the context, something that would stop him in his tracks. She wrote the warning not in English, but in perfect, formal Korean, a language Beatrice did not know. A language Noah reserved only for his deepest, most private thoughts. It was the language of his ancestors, the language that demanded his absolute attention. Your wife is translating wrong. Dylan demanded you come unarmed. If your men carry weapons, his snipers will fire. Dylan demanded you stay in your car. If you approach his lieutenant, you will be shot. Pier 40 is a trap designed by your wife. Do not go. She stared at the napkin. It was a death sentence if she was caught. Naomi crept out of the kitchen. The boardroom was momentarily empty. Noah had stepped into his private washroom to splash water on his face, the sound of the running faucet echoing lightly. Moving with the silent, practiced grace of a woman used to being invisible, Naomi slipped into the boardroom. She placed the napkin directly on top of Noah's black leather gloves resting on the mahogany table. Beside the gloves was his loaded sidearm. She didn't linger. She didn't look back. Naomi darted out of the room, retreating to the shadows of the service corridor just as the washroom door clicked open. Standing in the dim light of the hallway, her heart pounding in her ears, Naomi watched through the slightly open door. Noah walked back to the table. He reached for his gloves. He stopped, his eyes locked onto the cream-colored napkin. Naomi held her breath as Noah picked it up. He read the Korean script. For a terrifying, endless 10 seconds, the Mafia boss didn't move a single muscle. He stood frozen, staring at the words. Then, slowly, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The subtle, relaxed posture of the syndicate leader vanished, replaced by the terrifying, predatory stillness of a man who had just realized there was a viper in his bed. Noah crushed the napkin in his fist. The silence in the penthouse was no longer tranquil. It was the suffocating quiet of a bomb, counting down its final seconds. Noah stood rigid by the mahogany table, his knuckles turning white as his grip tightened around the crumpled napkin. His mind, trained by decades of navigating the treacherous waters of organized crime, rapidly processed the impossible variables. He didn't yell. He didn't throw the whiskey glass. Instead, he reached over to the intercom on his desk, his hand completely steady, and pressed the button. Gabriel. Yes, boss? The lieutenant's voice crackled through the speaker. Halt the armory loadout. Tell the men to stand by. No one leaves the building. Boss? The timeline. I said stand by, Gabriel. Noah released the button, cutting off the connection. He turned his gaze slowly around the empty boardroom. Dylan and his crew were gone. Beatrice was gone. His own men were downstairs. The only other person on this floor had been the cleaning staff. Noah stepped out of the boardroom, his footsteps completely silent on the plush carpet. Down the hall, Naomi was violently stabbing the call button for the service elevator. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Come on, she prayed, watching the digital floor indicator tick upward agonizingly slowly. She just needed to get to the basement, change out of her uniform, and disappear into the frigid Chicago night. She had warned him. Her conscience was clear. Now, she needed to survive. A massive hand clamped down on her shoulder, spinning her around with terrifying force. Naomi gasped, her back hitting the cold steel of the elevator doors. Noah towered over her. Up close, the sheer physical presence of the man was overwhelming. His dark eyes were bottomless pits of calculated rage, yet his face was an unreadable mask. He held up the crumpled napkin, pinning it against the wall next to her head. You wrote this, Noah stated. It wasn't a question. His gravelly baritone vibrated in the narrow corridor. Naomi tried to swallow the lump of pure terror in her throat. Denying it was useless. The black Sharpie was still poking out of her uniform apron. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling despite her desperate attempts to keep it steady. Noah leaned in closer, the scent of expensive cologne and dark liquor washing over her. Do you have any idea what you've just done? You are accusing my wife of orchestrating my assassination. He pressed his forearm against the wall, effectively trapping her. Who paid you? Was it Dylan? Did the Russians put a rat in my cleaning crew to sow discord before the meet? No one paid me! Naomi flared, a sudden spark of indignation cutting through her fear. She wasn't some pawn in his twisted underworld games. I make $18 an hour scrubbing your floors, Mr. Noah. I don't work for the Russians. I don't work for anybody but the agency. Then how do you know what was said in that room? Noah's voice dropped to a dangerous, lethal whisper. How do you know Korean? How do you know Russian? Because I'm not just a mop pusher. She snapped back, her brown eyes locking fiercely onto his. The sheer audacity of her defiance made Noah blink. I studied international linguistics at Georgetown. I lived in Seoul for 2 years. I speak fluent Russian and Spanish. I heard every single word Dylan said, and I heard exactly how your wife twisted them. Noah studied her. He looked past the cheap navy blue uniform, past the terrified cleaner, and saw the sharp, intelligent woman underneath. The way she held his gaze, refusing to cower, sparked something foreign in his chest, a profound, unexpected respect. Prove it, he demanded softly. Dylan said, the shipment arrives tonight at Pier 40. Exactly at midnight, Naomi recited, her pronunciation in Russian absolutely flawless, mimicking the heavy, guttural Moscow street dialect Dylan had used. She seamlessly switched to English. Then he said, if your men show up to the docks carrying heavy weapons, my snipers will consider it an ambush. We will open fire. Noah's jaw clenched tight. Naomi continued, her voice gaining strength. He told you to stay by your car. He told you to let your second in command approach Yuri for the ledger. He specifically warned that if you approached, they would assume it was a hostage grab and kill you. Your wife told you to arm your men. She told you to approach Yuri yourself. Naomi paused, letting the heavy truth settle between them. She sent you to a firing squad, Noah. The Mafia boss closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, the cold calculation was back, sharper than ever. The pieces fell together with sickening clarity. Beatrice's father, Senator Arthur Sterling, was currently drowning in a federal indictment regarding embezzled campaign funds. The feds were pressuring him to flip on Noah's syndicate. If Noah died tonight in a shootout with Russian gun runners, the feds would wipe out the Russians. The senator's slate would be wiped clean by a grateful FBI, and Beatrice would inherit Noah's sprawling, multi-billion-dollar empire as the grieving, innocent widow. It was a masterstroke of betrayal. Noah stepped back, releasing Naomi. He smoothed the lapels of his suit, his face carved from stone. What is your name? Naomi. Naomi Washington. Naomi, Noah said, his voice stripped of its previous menace, replaced by a chillingly calm authority. Go to the executive suite. There is a closet in the master bedroom. Find a coat. You are coming with me to Pier 40. Naomi's eyes widened in horror. What? No, I warned you so you wouldn't go. I'm not going to a mob shootout. There won't be a shootout, Noah replied, turning toward the boardroom, because I am going to follow Dylan's exact instructions. But Dylan is a paranoid man. When he sees my wife isn't with me, he will refuse to speak. I need a translator I can trust. He paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. The intensity in his dark eyes made her breath hitch. You saved my life tonight, Naomi. Now, I need you to help me end hers. Midnight at Pier 40 was a desolate, freezing nightmare. The wind howling off Lake Michigan whipped razor-sharp snowflakes through the air, coating the massive shipping containers in a thin layer of ice. The smell of brine and rusted metal hung heavy in the darkness. A convoy of 4 black SUVs rolled onto the concrete pier, their headlights cutting through the snow blindness. In the back seat of the lead vehicle, Naomi sat stiffly beside Noah. She was swallowed up by a heavy, black tactical parka she had pulled from Beatrice's closet. Underneath her coat, her heart was beating so violently she was certain Noah could hear it. Noah, however, was a picture of terrifying serenity. He was checking the magazine of his customized matte black pistol before sliding it into his shoulder holster. Gabriel, Noah spoke into a secure earpiece. Status. We are positioned, boss, Gabriel's voice replied through the radio. We followed your new orders. The main crew in the SUVs are completely unarmed, hands visible. But I've got a dozen men in the water wearing dry suits and suppressed submachine guns clinging to the pilings, entirely out of sight from the cranes. If Dylan's snipers try anything, we take them from below. Good, hold discipline. Noah tapped his earpiece, cutting the channel. He turned to Naomi. The neon lights from the dashboard cast sharp shadows across his face. Are you ready? I don't belong here, Naomi whispered, clutching the edges of her oversized coat. Noah reached out, his large, warm hand gently covering her trembling fingers. The touch was completely unexpected, sending a jolt of electricity up her arm. You belong exactly where you choose to be, Naomi. Tonight, you are my voice. Do not show them fear. Do not break eye contact with Dylan. You speak with my authority now. The SUVs came to a halt. The engines idled, low and menacing. Through the windshield, Naomi saw them. 50 yards away, Dylan stood flanked by his massive, heavily tattooed guards. Above them, atop the towering yellow loading cranes, the faint glint of sniper scopes caught the ambient light. It was a perfectly laid trap, ready to spring. We step out now, Noah instructed. Keep your hands out of your pockets. Noah opened his door and stepped into the biting cold. Naomi followed, moving to stand slightly behind his right shoulder. As they emerged, the rear doors of the other SUVs opened. Gabriel and the rest of Noah's men stepped out. They wore no tactical vests. Their coats were unbuttoned. Their hands were completely empty and held away from their sides. Dylan narrowed his eyes, clearly thrown off balance. He had expected an armed militia. He had expected Noah to walk into the crosshairs. Noah stood perfectly still by the hood of his car, exactly as the Russian instructions had demanded. He did not take a single step forward. He raised his chin, looking across the snowy expanse at Dylan, and gestured with an open palm toward a solitary figure standing by the south crane Yuri, holding a metal briefcase. Tell Gabriel to retrieve the ledger, Noah murmured to Naomi, his lips barely moving. Gabriel, go get it, Naomi called out, her voice remarkably steady despite the freezing wind. Gabriel walked forward alone, his hands visible, crossing the no man's land. He approached Yuri, took the heavy metal briefcase without a word, and walked backward until he returned to Noah's side. The transaction was complete. No shots fired, no blood spilled. Dylan looked utterly bewildered. He barked an order to his men to stand down. He then began walking slowly across the tarmac toward Noah, his heavy boots crunching against the ice. Where is your beautiful wife, Noah? Dylan called out in Russian as he approached, stopping 10 feet away. And why are you following my rules? I was told you were an arrogant king who bows to no one. Noah didn't need the translation to understand the mockery in Dylan's tone. He glanced at Naomi. Tell him. Naomi stepped out from behind Noah. She stood tall, squaring her shoulders against the freezing wind. She looked directly into the eyes of the ruthless Russian warlord. Noah honors the true terms of an agreement. Naomi spoke in flawless, authoritative Russian. He does not bring guns to a peaceful exchange, and he respects the boundaries set by his partners. Dylan stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened as he looked at the black woman in the oversized coat. He looked from her to Noah, then threw his head back and let out a booming laugh that echoed across the empty docks. You brought a new translator, Dylan said, grinning, though his eyes remained dangerous. A street smart one. She speaks like she was raised in the Bratva. Ask him, Noah interrupted in English, his tone deadly, who contacted his lieutenant yesterday to confirm the security protocols. Naomi translated the question perfectly. Dylan wiped the snow from his face, his smile fading into a grim sneer. Your wife called Yuri on a secure line. She said you were paranoid, that you would bring assault rifles regardless of my warnings. She said if you stepped forward for the ledger, my men shouldn't hesitate to put you down, because you were planning to take Yuri hostage. Naomi relayed the English translation to Noah. Noah's face remained completely impassive, but Naomi could feel the murderous aura radiating from him. Beatrice had tied the noose tight. If Noah had brought guns, Dylan would have shot him. If Noah had walked forward, Dylan would have shot him. Beatrice had ensured there will a scenario where her husband walked off Pier 40 alive. Tell Dylan, Noah said, his voice dropping to a terrifying register, that our business is concluded. The weapons belong to me. He has his money. He should take his men and leave Chicago tonight, because by morning the streets will be painted red. Naomi translated the grim promise. Dylan nodded respectfully, recognizing the fury of a betrayed king. Good luck, Noah. You will need it. There are rats in your house. Dylan turned to signal his men to pack up. But before the Russians could retreat, a sudden, blinding array of high-beam spotlights snapped on from the far end of the pier, cutting through the snowy darkness. The roar of heavy, unarmored troop transports echoed off the concrete. 4 massive, unmarked trucks crashed through the chain-link perimeter gates, skidding to a halt to block the only exit. Over 30 men poured out of the back of the trucks. They weren't cops. They wore heavy tactical gear, balaclavas, and carried military-grade automatic rifles. What the hell is this? Gabriel yelled, drawing his sidearm. Dylan whipped around, his face pale. You set me up, Noah, the Russian roared, drawing his own weapons. It's not me, Noah shouted over the roar of the engines, grabbing Naomi by the arm and pulling her violently behind the heavy engine block of his SUV. It's Beatrice's father, Senator Sterling's mercenaries. It's the backup plan. Senator Sterling and Beatrice hadn't just planned to have Dylan kill Noah. They had planned a secondary strike. If Noah survived the trap, or if the Russians won the firefight, Sterling's private mercenary army, led by a ruthless ex-military contractor named Conrad, was ordered to sweep in, slaughter whoever was left, and steal the massive cache of heavy artillery for themselves. Gunfire erupted. The night was instantly torn apart by the deafening chatter of automatic rifles. Concrete exploded into deadly shrapnel. Sparks flew violently as bullets ricocheted off the shipping containers and the metal bodies of the SUVs. Get down! Noah roared, throwing his entire body over Naomi as the windows of their vehicle shattered inward, showering them in a cascade of glittering glass. Naomi squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her face against the freezing, wet tarmac. The world was ending in a symphony of violence. She felt Noah's heavy, muscular frame shielding her, his own gun drawn, returning fire over the hood of the car. Gabriel! Noah shouted into his radio over the chaos. Unleash the water team! Take out the floodlights! Suddenly, from beneath the freezing black waters of the harbor, a dozen dark figures emerged from the shadows of the pilings. The real war for Chicago had just begun. The freezing waters of Lake Michigan erupted. A dozen of Noah's elite strike team, clad in black neoprene dry suits, breached the surface with terrifying synchronization. Armed with suppressed Heckler and Koch MP5 submachine guns, they didn't aim for Senator Sterling's mercenaries first. They aimed for the stadium-grade floodlights mounted on the transport trucks. The heavy glass bulbs shattered in a shower of sparks, plunging Pier 40 back into absolute pitch-black darkness. Panic seized the mercenaries. Accustomed to fighting in the light, they suddenly found themselves blind in a meat grinder. Dylan's Russian snipers, equipped with thermal optics atop the yellow cranes, finally found their targets. The heavy, rhythmic thud of suppressed sniper fire rained down from above. Beside the bullet-riddled SUV, Noah shoved a fresh magazine into his Glock 19. He didn't look at the carnage. His eyes were entirely fixed on Naomi. She was curled tight against the icy asphalt, her hands covering her ears, trembling violently in the oversized parka. Noah reached out, gripping her chin firmly but gently, forcing her to look at him. His thumb brushed a stray piece of shattered windshield glass from her dark cheek. "Breathe, Naomi," he commanded softly, his voice an anchor in the storm of gunfire. "You are with me. Nothing touches you tonight." Within 3 minutes, the gunfire sputtered and died. The alliance of Russian paranoia and Korean precision had completely eradicated Senator Arthur Sterling's private army. Conrad, the mercenary leader, lay motionless near the chain link gate. Dylan emerged from behind a shipping container, wiping a streak of blood from his cheek. He looked at the bodies, then at Noah. He gave a slow, respectful nod. "Your house is bleeding, Noah," Dylan called out in Russian. "Go clean it. The weapons are yours." Noah didn't wait. He pulled Naomi to her feet, shielding her body with his own as he guided her to the one surviving armored Maybach in his convoy. The drive back down Lakeshore Drive was suffocatingly quiet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a heavy, dangerous silence in the luxurious leather interior of the car. Noah poured 2 glasses of scotch from the Maybach's built-in console. He handed one to Naomi. Her hands shook so badly the amber liquid sloshed against the crystal rim. "Drink," he ordered gently. She took a burning swallow, the liquor searing her throat and warming her freezing blood. She looked at the man beside her. The ruthless syndicate boss, whose life she had just saved, was watching her with a terrifying intensity. There was no longer a divide between the invisible cleaner and the billionaire kingpin. She had stepped into his world, and he was locking the door behind her. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To Astor Street," Noah replied, his eyes dark and unreadable. "To see my grieving widow." At the sprawling, historic estate on Astor Street, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the blood-soaked docks. Inside the palatial study, a fire roared in the marble hearth. Beatrice sat across from her father, Senator Arthur Sterling. Beatrice smiled, raising a crystal snifter of Macallan 25. "To new beginnings, father. By now, the Russians have wiped out Noah, and Conrad has wiped out the Russians." "You played it perfectly, my dear," the senator chuckled, his face flushed with greed. "The feds will drop my indictment by morning when I hand them the empty shell of Noah's empire." The heavy mahogany doors of the study didn't just open. They were kicked inward with such force the brass hinges splintered. Beatrice dropped her glass. It shattered on the Persian rug, the expensive scotch soaking into the wool. Noah stood in the doorway. He was covered in snow, grease, and the unmistakable scent of cordite. But it was the woman stepping out from behind him that made Beatrice's blood run entirely cold. It was the night shift cleaner from the Sterling Tower, still wearing Beatrice's own custom-tailored winter parka. "Noah!" Beatrice gasped, instantly forcing a mask of hysterical relief onto her face. She rushed forward. "Oh my God, you're alive!" "I heard there was a shootout at the docks." I was terrified. Noah moved so fast Beatrice didn't have time to blink. He bypassed her entirely, crossing the room to grab the corrupt senator by the throat, slamming the older man against the antique bookshelves. "Noah, what are you doing?" Beatrice shrieked. Noah didn't look at her. He looked at Naomi, standing quietly by the doorway. Naomi stepped forward, the fear that had paralyzed her at the docks replaced by a cold, righteous clarity. She looked directly at the woman who had treated her like a piece of furniture for 2 years. "He knows, Beatrice," Naomi said, her voice steady and echoing in the grand room. Beatrice sneered, her aristocratic mask slipping. "Knows what? What is this trash doing in my house, Noah? She's a cleaner." "She is the woman who speaks perfect Russian," Noah said quietly, dropping the gasping senator to the floor. Noah turned to his wife, his eyes devoid of any emotion. "She translated your little trap, and she is the woman who survived the mercenary hit squad your father sent to finish the job." Beatrice's face drained of all color. She backed away, hitting the edge of the mahogany desk. "Noah, please. It was him," she sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at her coughing father. "He made me do it. He needed a way out of his federal charges." Save it, Noah interrupted. He unclasped the heavy platinum Patek Philippe watch from his wrist and tossed it onto the desk. Gabriel's men are outside. They have secured the estate. Your father's offshore accounts have already been drained by my hackers, and his embezzlement files were emailed to the FBI 10 minutes ago. You are leaving Chicago tonight with nothing but the clothes on your back. If I ever see your face again, Beatrice, there won't be a translation error to save you. Gabriel entered the room, his gun drawn, and dragged the screaming senator and the sobbing Beatrice out into the freezing night. Silence fell over the study, save for the crackling fire. Noah walked over to the bar, poured a fresh glass of water, and handed it to Naomi. He looked down at her, seeing the fierce, brilliant woman who had risked everything. You said you make $18 an hour, Noah murmured, stepping dangerously close. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. I did, Naomi whispered, looking up into his dark eyes, her heart racing for an entirely new reason. Not anymore, Noah said, his voice dropping to a smooth, possessive rumble. I need someone who can see the things I miss, someone who hears the truth when the rest of the world is lying. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. The mop is retired, Naomi. You belong by my side now. Naomi looked at the empty room, the shattered glass, and the dangerous, powerful man offering her the keys to an empire. She didn't look down at the floor anymore. She looked him dead in the eye and smiled. Then I expect a hell of a raise, boss. The shadows hold the deadliest secrets, but sometimes the person you ignore is the only one who can save your life. Naomi traded her mop for a crown, proving that brilliance and bravery can conquer even the darkest underworld betrayals. If you love this intense mafia thriller, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more gripping, twist-filled romance dramas. What should Naomi do next? Comment below.